Today we're talking about how to get an awesome job, crossing over from another position maybe, portfolios, job interviews, and generally how to get started in UX. My name's Lee Chambers. I'm one of the co-founders of UX Mastery. We're based in Melbourne, Australia. It's currently a cool, overcast 9 AM Sunday morning here. I've got a little croak in my throat, so apologies in advance about that. And sitting not too far away from me with his sketchpad and pen is Matt McGain. How are you today, Matt?
I'm great. I've got my coffee, I've got my sketchpad. We're going to try this little experiment where I'm going to sketchnote our webinar. If I'm a bit distracted in the conversation, it's because I'm trying to do several things at once, but that's okay. It's all good. We'll see how it goes. If it's too hard, we'll can it for next time, but it should be fun.
Very good. Very, very good. And we're also very lucky to have with us today Patrick Neeman, all the way from Seattle. How are you, Patrick?
Pretty good. Getting over a cold and enjoying the Seattle rainy weather, but yeah, doing fine.
Lovely. Tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
So my name is Patrick Neeman. I'm a director of product design at a company called Apptio. We help companies manage their IT spend. You know, companies like American Express, Starbucks, Amazon, Walmart, or not Walmart, Microsoft. Pretty big companies. Before that, I worked at a company called a couple of companies before. It was called JobVite, director of UX there, and JobVite was a company that provided an applicant tracking system. So we interviewed over 100 recruiters and hiring managers during my time there, so we completely understand the hiring process, and I got to talk to a lot of really cool UX types while I was working there.
Very good. So you got good experience from both sides. And you also run the UXDrinkingGame.com.
That is correct. I actually run two things. I run something called Usability Counts. It's a blog that has over 45,000 words about advice about being in the UX field, and then I run the UX Drinking Game, which recently was featured in Pragmatic Marketing, which is a product management training webinar and event company.
Excellent. Well, I might kick into some questions now. Just over a week ago, UX Mastery launched community forums at community.uxmastery.com, and we've been having some great conversations in there. Some people asking questions they'd like to have answered for today's webinar. So thank you to all of you who submitted questions. Some great questions in there. I've got the list here in front of me, and we'll go through them with Patrick. If you've got a question about landing a UX job you'd like Patrick to help with, then you should be able to submit it in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll see that. We'll get to them after we've done these ones that have already been submitted. So Patrick, first one here, we've got from Armin. Armin's asking, how can I increase my job opportunities when I live in an area where there are no study or work opportunities for a UX specialist? I've had some success writing on medium.com and other sites, but what else can I do for my career?
Basically, the first question I ask is, where do you live? The second question, there are a lot of areas in the United States, for example, where they don't have UX specialist roles. And what I encourage designers to do is to do a lot of the UX activities as part of their design process with customers. There's nobody telling you that you can't do personas, you can't do usability research, you can't run focus groups, you can't do wireframes. You just go ahead and do it. And then when you get to the next client, you show, hey, this is the work I did for this one client, and you actually use it as part of your portfolio. One of the examples that I can use that's really relevant in my life is last weekend we participated in an event called Startup Weekend here in Seattle, and we actually went through the process of building a whole prototype, including, is there a place where I can type the URL? And this, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat window.
I'll write the URL in our sketchnote, Patrick.
Yeah, so we went through the whole process of doing a prototype. We did a presentation. We were competing against 10 other startups, and we won the design portion. And all the designers that I brought along to the event, they're using it in their portfolio to show, hey, look, this is the UX work that we did. We did research. We did some usability testing. It was a lot of fun.
Excellent. So I think Armin was in Armenia. There's not a lot of sort of groups around there. Should be something like we look around online.
Yeah, do side projects too. Side projects are awesome for doing stuff like this.
Excellent. Second question from Carrie. I am currently working as the only developer on a web project. I'm finding the experience terribly lonely, isolating, and becoming increasingly depressed, especially as I do not have anyone to bounce ideas off. And lack some understanding from fellow colleagues leads to the assumption that my work is easy or they could do better. Have you had a similar
our work
experience?
Is so easy.
Have you had a similar experience, and how important do you think it is to be able to share ideas?
I think it's really, really important to share ideas. There's this wonderful thing called Twitter, where you can go ahead and follow a whole bunch of designers, and they're all over the world. And I actually do this a lot. And they reach out for me for a Skype call, and we share the work that we're doing, and we get feedback, and it's kind of like a remote usability test, and it's very, very powerful. Most designers are very introverted because of the emotional nature of our jobs, and that is one outlet that you can do to kind of do that. Another thing that you can do is once you get on Twitter or once you get to start going to meetups, you can actually invite designers out for coffee. I actually live right above a coffee place, and so we're there all the time, probably about like once a week or once every couple of weeks, where I'm meeting with a designer, we're talking about our work, and really exploring the kind of design stuff that we're doing.
Very good. Another question from Cassandra. I've been attempting to break into a UX designer position for a few years now. I have a few years of web design and front-end development. Available positions are for mid-level or senior UX designers. If I can't afford UX schooling and have limited UX experience, what's the best course to breaking into this career?
That's a really, really tough one. I just recently hired a junior designer at Apptio, and he had a really, really good mind for UX, and his visual design stuff is great. And we're actually training him, but he was kind of lucky because he found an opportunity where he can get onto a bigger team and actually learn from other people. That's what I would like. That would be the first thing I would say is look for companies that might have junior people or junior positions open. I know that's kind of hard. Another way that you could do it again is you could reach out to other designers that are more senior than you, do side projects or do other work, and then show them your work, and it's almost as good as working with them directly.
Right.
And another thing is like another way that you could do that if you have web development. I was looking at this. You have web design and front end development experience. What you could do is you could go somewhere and use those skills. Go somewhere where they already have a senior designer working. And you say, hey, look, these are the skills I have. I want to work with this designer. I'll do this web development and design stuff for a while, but I really want to pick up interaction design. That's the way that most of the junior designers did. They broke into the field.
So Patrick, just kind of off the back of that, if you don't have a visual design background, is that a hurdle for people, do you think?
I actually don't. One of the prototypers I have at work, he has a background in informatics, which is basically the product, I'm going to do quotes here, product management degree at University of Washington. And so he's a programmer, and he has an interaction design background. And so he's been instrumental in helping us create a prototype for the company. And I actually value that skill set a lot because he thinks of a lot of things that we don't think of because we're designers. We don't totally get involved in all the technology.
That's a good point. We've got another question here from Pitchy. He says, I started life in a VA role and later moved into development. Recently I did solo job designing and building an in-house system for a small business where I particularly enjoyed getting back into requirements analysis, wireframing, etc. I'd like to do more of this kind of work. Do you know if there's much of a market in the UXD world for back office business systems, or does the money tend to go to customer-facing products?
Oh, this is an awesome question. Where I work at, is heavy enterprise. It's IT spend. It's B2B. If you find the right companies, it's a huge market, but from the two perspectives. The first perspective is they're always looking for people that understand business-to-business systems because they're a lot more complex than developing, say, an iPhone app. And the second thing is, and this is the story that I tell people. Just me being an enterprise, it's literally like 20 years of job security. As technology improves and as the products improve, the younger generations are actually expecting more products that work like an iPhone or iPad. Yeah. And so having a great user experience designer on staff is very, very important. Does that make sense? I mean, basically, like the upper management I work with are basically saying, yeah, we know you have to have the back end thing, but they also realize that a great user experience also sells the product.
Yeah. And
that's going to increase demand for people like us, which is awesome. The pay's great, so.
It is. They're very good. Excellent. We've got a few more questions coming in now. We've got one from Tim. Tim says, I'm just starting out with UX, conducting focus groups, doing usability testing, and now creating personas. Do you have examples of a good portfolio design?
There's actually, I'm going to type it into the window, and then you guys can move it across.
Matt can put it on the sketch there.
Yeah. So there's this one portfolio that I point people to. Lori, she's some assistant designer that I mentored that's now working for Amazon Lab 126. One of her portfolio pieces tells this great story about how they went through all the research, and she talked about personas, and she did all the stuff, and it was a 3-day project. And it tells an amazing story.
There's a lot of information about UX portfolios online. UX Masteries just put out an ebook about getting started in UX, and part of the bundled bonus extras with that ebook is a portfolio template and a resume template. And that resume template is actually Patrick's one. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what went into that, Patrick?
So the resume template was something that I actually developed when I was working at JobVite. About 6 years ago, I went through a quote layoff, and I realized that my template was horribly out of date, and so I had a copywriter rewrite it. And then when I got to JobVite, which is an applicant tracking system, I actually tested my template through JobVite over and over and over again until I got to a format that I knew that worked perfectly in most applicant tracking systems. I also did quote usability testing, quotes, on showing it to recruiters and everything. And the template basically states, hey, this is what I did at a job, and then these were the goals that I achieved. For example, if you worked at a job like an e-commerce site, then you could talk about how you increased shopping cart conversion 5%. And that's the kind of stuff that recruiters are looking for.
Excellent. It's excellent advice. Got a few more questions rolling in here by the forums. UXer asks, why is it that suddenly everybody wants to be in UX? Is it because they want to be in technology but don't want to learn code? Somehow became trendy. I assume that over the time.
Well, should we describe what UX is to start the discussion?
Sure, let's go.
So the way that I interpreted UX myself is it's an overarching discipline that includes interaction design, content strategy, visual design, front-end development, and then research. And there's a couple others in there like information architecture. So it covers a lot of ground. And so when you have a UX team and you look at the people in the room, like at Apptio, you're like, how did these people ever get into the same team? I have the most, it's not like a whole bunch of product managers sitting around. It's like literally, wow, they all have very different skill sets. How do you manage that? I think the reason that people got into it was because of Apple. You know, the iPhone's a wonderful product. Oh, I want to develop iPhone apps for that. What they don't realize when they get into UX is you just don't go off and get to create a product. You actually have to collaborate with a whole bunch of different groups of people and like product managers and developers, and they don't realize that they think that they're going to be able to design a product on their own. What it really comes down to is You don't design the product, you actually just facilitate good design.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
I think that's exactly what this person's asking. I mean, the connection between the business strategy and the design team to sort of provide value for the customer is sort of that expression of the facilitation, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, what I like it is a lot of the products that I've worked on have been in front of millions of people. Like I was doing some work at Microsoft, and the potential was 500 million people, and that is just, it's a huge driver for why I like being in this field.
I know that Jeff Gothelf in his Lean UX book talks about that exact point too. He talks about how one thing that we need to learn as designers is that we are design facilitators, and that everybody has valid input to influence the design, and we need to be prepared to create and instill a process where that collaboration and that input is synthesized, and you end up with the synergy of the team to, without wanting to use too crazy a buzzword, to end up with a great result.
Yeah, and it's really hard to create a design culture. I mean, creating the right environment where that collaboration actually respects all roles is really, really hard. And what's even harder about that is, like, a lot of other people think that, they think that everybody can be a designer, and they don't understand that a lot of us have spent years and years of beating our heads against a wall to really understand what good UX is.
And so on that point, because that's something that I've really struggled a lot with in big enterprise clients, and that's the idea of championing and justifying and selling user experience as a valid focus. What has been your experience with that problem, and how have you overcome it?
It really depends. I mean, having a design influence culture is really top down, and what you do is you have to start pounding their head more with data. Like where I'm working at now, we're just starting to get into data-driven design. That we're collecting immense amounts of data on how our customers use the product, yet nobody had bothered to analyze it. And so one of the things that we've been working over the past few weeks is like, hey, we got all this amazing data. Once they saw it, like, the light bulb totally turned on. There, you can illustrate a light bulb. And now they realize, instead of just guessing, doing a lot of asking the customers what they want, now we know what they're using, and that totally transforms the conversation. Many companies never get to a design influence culture, and it hurts their bottom line.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
And so, sorry to hijack the question thread. This is a bit selfish of me, but I'm really interested in this stuff because, like, I've had those jobs, and so for your career, is it best if you're in that situation where you're in an organization where you can see that they don't get it, and you're not a behavior, like, you're not an org change consultant, you're a UXer, should you just acknowledge that there's only so much that you could do and cut your losses and move on and find a work environment where you can thrive and learn? Or, like, part of the stubborn consultant in me wants to go, no, I can change this place, I can really make a difference here. How do you...
That's actually a really good point. Like I've been in places, like, I've been presented with situations fairly recently where, like, we've had consultants in there, and literally change doesn't happen overnight. They're being a UX consultant, there are, like, two different approaches. Being a UX consultant, you're there to say, hey, there are all these things that are going wrong. There are some areas where you can fix. However, when you're in-house, and I'm moving my hands around, when you're in-house, that change comes much slower because you have to put all these pieces in place. For example, many companies, I think it was Scott Birkin had a book about this, A Year Without Wearing Pants or something like that, that actually talked about how change has to be slow, and you have to do it one piece at a time, and you have to involve a lot of people, and a lot of people do understand what design-led means, but they don't know how it changes their job. And so you have to gradually educate them across the organization about, hey, this is what it really means. And it's a very difficult conversation because it actually involves them sharing a piece of where they find pride. Like, a lot of people, they want to be involved in the wireframing and they want to be in this, but they don't understand what the wireframing means and how it's an expression of design thinking, for example.
Yeah, cool.
It's often said that the best way to learn UX is to do it, but what aspects of UX do you think can't be taught, Patrick?
System design and acknowledging patterns, and seeing patterns in information. I don't think that can be taught. Like, one of the reasons I've really enjoyed this job, and I feel I'm successful at it, is I'm able to distill systems into objects and patterns. I see patterns in everything. I don't think that's something that can be necessarily taught at a very high level. Some of the soft skills are a little bit challenging for us because it involves, a lot of times you have to disagree and commit, where you disagree with a concept, but you still have to follow the business needs, and that's actually a really hard skill to teach. The visual design stuff is really, really tough. Like, visual design is under UX, and either you have it or you don't. Does that make sense? Like spatial design, for information design, for example. There are a lot of illustrators out there that do that do visual design, but they don't understand the structure of a page, for example.
So you were talking before about how UX as a field has a very broad range of skill sets and things like that. So if people didn't necessarily have the visual skills, what sort of things could they head towards?
Content strategy, UX research, information design, because they can still sketch out on a page. Information architecture is an art form in itself, and it's one that a lot of teams have a missing component of, which is taxonomies, understanding how information is structured. There we go. And what's another one? Prototyping. I mean, if you have a programmer background and you learn interaction design, that's huge.
That's very true. Jen asks, I find it difficult to overcome the hurdle of not having 5+ years of experience in UX. How does one get their foot in the door without years of UX experience? I come from a visual design background, but have several users in that field.
Yeah, I'll use the example of like one recruiter that I talked to. I actually wrote an article about it on my blog, how to get into UX. And who is it? Mary Gillian, I think is her last name. She gave me a call. We outlined what I thought the steps were to break into the field as a non-designer. She followed them step by step, and now she's a web producer that does user experience, where she directs a team at an interactive agency. And like when I didn't actually write the article until after I had the call with her, but like when I look back, it was like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense. A lot of times what you can do is you can work at a company as like a web producer, say, hey, look, I'm a project manager, and then as you start working there, you can get more and more involved in the interactive process. Prototyper is another one. Account manager at agencies is a huge one. Product managers, sometimes they can make the shift. If you're a programmer and you can make the shift, it's actually pretty easy.
I think
Patty has a related question. Sorry.
I was just going to add to that and talk about my own experience, and that is that I came from, I did work as a programmer for a while and then as a visual designer and moved across. And I think a lot of people get hung up on this idea that I'm going to find a UX job and I'm going to be a UX specialist, and that's going to be my job that I get, and I'll do everything right and then I'll get that job. And I just think that you need to work towards this stuff, and you need to kind of be working in a role that may not have UX in the job title, but lets you kind of dip your toes and do bits and pieces along the way where you're working on a web project, you're involved with the team, you can, put your hand up for stuff as it appears. And like Patrick was saying, just make your way kind of sideways shift. We talk about this a little bit in the book, right? Where a bunch of ways that you can get exposure and experience is to be kind of working on a web project and volunteer to do some guerrilla user testing, or put your hand up to have a crack at some wireframes and move across that way. And I think that's a lot of I see a lot of people really hung up on getting that perfect UX job right out of the gate. And I think you just need to look at the long term.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Can I add to this too?
Please.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. Like the way that I broke into the field was, and I'm playing with my headphones here, but the way that I broke into the field was as I was a print designer. I actually volunteered to work for a political campaign as doing all the direct mail and all their branding. At the time, I didn't know it, but it turned into the most expensive U.S. congressional campaign in 1994. The guy that was the campaign manager went off to start an internet company, said, why don't you join? That was 95. I did a lot of side projects to learn more about the web, and look where I'm at today. When I interview interns for Apptio, I'm frankly sick of seeing, I have a hard time with seeing just school projects, because I have not gotten anywhere easy, and I need to see people that make the extra effort to go projects outside of school. We just recently hired an intern. He not only did school projects, but he also has illustration capabilities, kind of along the lines of what you're doing, Matt, right now. He used to be an architect, and he went out and did a whole bunch of side projects for getting paid for very little, and illustrated his thinking and talked about personas and talked about how he dealt with clients, and he was by far the best candidate that we interviewed because of the side work. There's no easy way. You can't just expect anybody to say, hey, why don't you come work here? We're going to train you. That's not the way this field works.
It's true.
Totally agree.
What about internships? Like if you offer yourself to a company as an intern?
What I tell people to do is follow companies on Twitter, follow people on Twitter, ask them, hey, is there an internship? U.S. is a little bit tricky right now because there's a lot of legal issues about that. But there's a lot of smaller startups that are willing to ignore, like, hey, will you intern for free? You just gotta have your spidey sense about like if it's useful or not. But like if you try that, if you do the startup weekend stuff or anything, there's a lot of opportunities to learn more about the field. And a lot of it is just kind of following the templates that show this is how UX is done.
Excellent. We've got quite a few questions coming in here. Thanks everyone for adding questions. We'll see if we can rip through a few. Suma asks, I am a service designer looking to work in UX who understands design process, but I don't have any portfolio which showcases UX skills apart from my academic projects. So I guess
is she working full time as a service designer?
I don't know. Maybe Suma, if you could clarify. I guess so. Approach it with that.
Like the process and the process and the personas and all the research, you could actually use that as your portfolio, because there's a lot of I really like the field of service design, and I think that there's a lot of value of showing like your thought and how it would apply to their companies doing web projects, for example.
Michael also asked a related question. I'm currently working in a full-time role, not directly in the UX area. How can I get the adequate qualifications in order to land my next UX job?
What's the full-time job title?
I don't know, Michael, what's your full-time job title? Yeah, I suppose that really depends on the job title as to how you would go about that.
He said designer.
What, web designer?
Graphic designer.
Graphic designer. Yeah.
Print?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so does he work at a place that's doing web stuff?
Should we try unmuting Michael and he can actually come into the conversation? Is that too?
Going to join in, Michael? Yes.
So, like, if there's another designer working on the web stuff, actually do some research, figure out what personas, what are the user goals for the websites that you guys are doing, and actually use that to develop your portfolio.
You with us now, Michael?
Yes, hello.
Cool. Does that answer your question? Did you want to dig any deeper there?
Yeah, I've been working in the public sector. Information design and information architecture.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't have any problem then. Because if you could show some of the taxonomy stuff and some of the site architecture stuff that you're doing as your portfolio piece, that's pretty powerful.
What about Michael's point of qualifications?
Thank you.
So we recently published an article on UX Mastery listing a bunch of degrees and
Yes.
ways that people can get some kind of formal accreditation. What are your thoughts on academic qualifications in UX, Patrick?
Being the college dropout 3 times, there are very few schools that I look to, like Carnegie Mellon, where I think the value is absolutely there. Like University of Washington here, they're trying to orient themselves. The problem I'm running into is that the education is good, but they don't have the right profile for the kind of stuff I need. And so I actually look to the side work to see if they can develop the skills to be an interaction designer.
So, Michael, have you had a specific experience where you've been asked for qualifications and told that it's a roadblock?
No, not really, but for my future career advancement, I've been looking towards a communication design postgraduate.
Yeah, what you could do is you could email me on the side, contact me off my blog, and I could probably answer you a little bit more directly.
I'm pretty sure that Luke and I can help you out there too, because we actually know Jeremy, who runs the communication design program at RMIT, which is, I assume, the degree you're looking at. So I'm sure that Jeremy would be more than happy to take a few minutes and have a coffee with you and chat about the course and see whether it's a good fit for you or not.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
No worries. Thank you, Michael. Jeffrey asks, how do you manage a UX process in an agile environment? For example, if you've got a deadline.
I get this asked a lot. Like Agile, okay, so a little backstory. I used to work for a magazine company as a print designer. We had magazines going out, 4 magazines to 5 magazines a week. My whole life runs on weekly sprints because I worked in a lot of publishing places. I just view Agile as a series of checkpoints and always building toward those checkpoints. So like it's okay to spread like research out over 4 weeks, but the 2-week sprints, it says, okay, what does this look like now? And then it just allows you to course correct. I don't get as fearful about Agile than most other designers because I don't know what the problem is. I was doing Agile in 2001. In fact, I was doing it in 1999, even before we knew it was Agile. So I don't see the big deal.
Yeah. And do you want to make a quick comment on also how sort of Lean UX relates to that?
So I've actually done a few projects around Lean UX philosophies. Again, back to that, I was doing Lean UX in 2001. Basically, you do a very minimal idea. You start showing in front of users, and then you keep moving forward. There was a particular case study out of the Eric Ries book about Lean Startup, where they were actually doing the product process for the customer totally non-tech. It was around, when we think about this, it was around they were helping consumers select menus to cook for their family, and they would actually go out to the home, ask the customer a whole bunch of questions, and then go out shopping for them. And they learned a lot about the process and the pain points, and it helped develop their product. And it was totally by hand.
Very good. Rachel asks, what are the most important qualities you look for in a UX candidate?
I have this, there's the soft skills. I'm actually looking for more quieter designers. I've had the experience of hiring more extroverted designers, and I actually find it's actually detrimental to the process because they don't listen enough. I look for people that listen. I look for people that have soft skills that can kind of like they'll stand their ground on certain ideas, but when they know they have to ship, they'll back off of it. There's this matrix of hard skills around 7 different areas of UX that I actually look for, and if I get 3 of them, then I'm pretty happy. And I look for system design, a lot of process. Like I want them to be able to adequately break down an idea into smaller pieces, but then put that idea back together into a larger concept.
So Cassandra asks a related question, thinking about presenting that in a portfolio. So with portfolio and resumes, how do we wow a recruiter and a hiring manager for a UX position?
It's back to that one Lori portfolio. Like, basically, I'm looking for step-by-step thinking. Having nice formatted wireframes is, it helps. But what I'm looking for is a very methodical process of the way that they designed it. And I'm also looking for research. Like, might have tweeted this last night. If you don't understand the user goals, then how can you design?
So you're putting that together to be able to tell your story of a project.
Yeah.
Wireframes and showing some process.
Yep. It's a lot of it. It's ability to tell stories. Like, there's this one project that I did. I use it as an example. A friend of mine runs a chiropractic business in Long Beach, California. I show the homepage. I don't even show wireframes. Bob the chiropractor. I'm gonna, everybody's gonna go there now. I show the homepage. I talk about the personas. I talk about some of the research that we did. I did it all for beers and like reduced rent on a condo that he was renting to me. And we put together the website. We were getting 8% conversion rate. We made one single change or a couple of changes, and it went up to 12% overnight. And all I do is show the homepage and the Google Analytics conversion tracking page. And it's an incredible story.
Sounds good. I'd be really interested to see that. It's putting together a portfolio is something that I haven't done in the past, but this last month or two, as we've been focusing on that kind of stuff for UX Mastery, I've been getting my head around a whole bunch of that stuff, and seeing people's portfolios and the way different people do certain things is it's fascinating. So
yeah, no, it's really fascinating.
I think that's the point that I felt like I had could justifiably promote to the world that my role was UX designer and not just not web designer, and that's when I felt like I'd refined my process to something that I could rely on. So if you don't have a process, then start thinking about it, start learning from other people's processes, and start working out what it is that you can rely on to be methodical in terms of getting a good result.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the UX stuff I do, I'm quite honestly, and you guys can see it kind of behind me in my apartment, like, everything's at a 45-degree angle. Like, I have this certain UX process that I've done over and over and over again because I know it works. And, it's about getting data, getting validation, talking to users, understanding the different groups of users, and designing against it. And I just keep doing it, and it works. And I change it every once in a while. But, like, once you have that kind of, like, that process and that pattern down, then it actually makes it a lot easier to design and commit on, this is what we need to do.
Very good. We've got about 15 minutes to go, so we'll rip through a few more questions, but then after that we might need to continue the conversation on the forums. Just getting back into some questions. Brittany asks, my background is user acquisition, marketing and research. I have a master's in sociology. I'm planning on getting a master's in human-computer interaction starting this summer. Do you think that it's necessary because of my background? I don't want to take on debt if I don't have to.
Where does she live?
Brittany, do you want to chip in? Here we go, Chicago.
You could probably get a job right now with your background in doing user research and some of that stuff. The HCD background might help you learn how to do wireframing and understand information architecture. And that might be the one area that you're missing.
Worth mentioning a bit about establishing a network too. So we talked about Twitter before, but having like going along to a bunch of meetups and meeting other UXers and other people that are in the industry and networking is going to be just as valuable or more valuable than trawling job sites. So like you want to open up as many opportunities as possible, and just, I guess, starting down this path of making sure that you've got that degree and then applying the stuff is one way to go about it. But if you're connected, if you've got your finger on the pulse about what's happening in your area and you know who's who, That's where the opportunities. That's where the gold opportunities come from.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pump up my Twitter feed. If you go to my Twitter page and Usability Counts on Twitter, I have a whole bunch of designers actually categorized in metropolitan areas and regions of the world that you can go follow. And I actually find that meetups are okay, but I've built actually better relationships with people off of Twitter, and I've gotten a lot more information. And then when I'm local to them, I always, hey, let's go have a coffee. There's a community that I'm involved with that I'm actually involved in with Matt. That I met a lot of the people off the group, and it's awesome because you get to establish that personal connection, which is better than going to a meetup. There's another thing that I'm going to mention about the whole networking thing. There's a study by a sociologist by the name of Mark Granovetter, and what he did was he found that 50% of people got jobs through something called a weak tie. Like, for example, I'm friends with Matt. Matt is friends with Luke. I asked Matt, hey, do you know any designers? And Matt goes, Luke is a great designer. Luke, in my world, is a weak tie. So if you network a lot and you find people of different, not just designers, but people of different skill sets, then you're actually going to have a better chance to get a job. A famous strategy for this is, instead of going to meetups where designers are at, go to meetups where developers and product managers are at, and I guarantee you'll be one of only a few designers there.
It's a good tip.
Like one of the interns that we brought into Apptio, I met her at Product Camp, not at UX event.
Patrick in Galway asks, I'm working in graphic design in print, wanting to move over to UX. I'm thinking of 1 day per week working for a UX company to get some experience. Would that be useful, or should I try and do a longer block of time? Would offering graphic design skills?
Why don't you do it? Start doing it now, because I'm a former print designer, and then see how it goes. I think it's a good idea.
So one day a week would be enough to.
Yeah, and then you can start doing side projects too that kind of play around too.
Alison asks, my current job title is digital designer.
Yep.
During my work, I create wireframes and development notes on functionality as well as the final interface design to produce apps. Does this qualify as user experience work?
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. Any day of the week, and then what you can do is you can ask them to change your job title so it's closer to interaction designer or product designer or UX designer.
Kariba asks, do you think that a background in psychology can be helpful in UX, especially when dealing with highly political company cultures?
Every day of the week.
Yeah.
Yes.
Psychology is a big part of both designing a user experience and facilitating it and running things too, because you understand how people learn, how you can teach, how you can communicate.
Well, a little background on HCD, a human-computer interface. A lot of it is related to pilots that during World War I and World War II, they couldn't figure out, geez, why are they crashing? And so the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force actually did a lot of work in that area, and that was the beginning of a lot of work around HCD. Also, there's a lot of talk about how Henry Ford, for example, figured out how to make assembly lines more efficient based on the work they did looking at processes and looking how people use technology. Even though it's not computers, it's still very relevant to our field.
Have you ever worked with a psychology on your team, Patrick?
One of the people that I have on my team, she actually has she has a researcher background. Yes. We talk a lot about mental models and that kind of things. Yeah.
A friend of UX Mastery, Jody Moore from Simplicit. Simplicit's a Melbourne-based UX consultancy that are doing very well, and yeah, Jody is a former behavioural psychologist who decided to get into UX, and they're doing great work. And I think that's a bit of a competitive advantage for those guys.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like looking back, I wish I knew more about this field. I'm a little bit older, so like I had a job before the internet. But like I wish I knew more sometimes in some of those more formal fields.
Very good. We've probably got time for about another 1 or 2 questions, so sorry to everyone who we're not going to get to today. Todd asks, I was previously a UX designer at my company, but I realized I could add more value as a product owner. So I've since transitioned my role into that direction. I've been a product owner for about 4 months now and do really enjoy it. It seems a very natural fit for a former UX designer. I'm still very passionate about UX though. If I were to look for a UX position in the future, would my experience as a product owner be an advantage or a disadvantage?
As a former product manager and program manager, sure. I actually have toyed with the thought of going back over the product management because I think having a UX background over there is very powerful. And there are many, many UX designers that are making the transition over to product management because we tend to identify better with the user than some of the other people that have been in that role.
Yeah, I'm giving a talk at a product management meet here in Melbourne later this month, actually. It's called Product Anonymous. So if anyone's in Melbourne, come along to Product Anonymous because product managers are really interested in UX. There's a lot of overlap between the two roles. There's stuff that we can learn from those guys about marketing and market validation, and there's stuff that those guys can learn from UXers about visual thinking and about user research as compared to market research. So I think that there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot to be learned from both fields. So you're not going to hurt your UX career by being a product owner, definitely.
Yep.
Very good. Final question from Ben. Ben asks, he says, hey Patrick, thanks for spending the time to chat. Do you think it's more of an advantage being either a generalist or a specialist?
It really depends. Like I live in Seattle, so Microsoft is here, Amazon is here. One of the issues that I have with interviewing people from those, both not Amazon so much, but from Microsoft, is they have a lot of specialists, and so I have a generalist UX team, and yeah, we can take a few more questions if you guys want to. I have a generalist UX team, and so I find specialists very hard to hire. It's back to the 7 kind of disciplines of UX that I hire against. Like I include data viz in that. Like I tend to look for people that have at least 2, maybe 3 skill sets. They call it a T-shaped skill set. For example, I have a visual design background. I actually tend to go more towards information architecture and interaction design. And so I have more of a generalist skill set than some of the other people. And the area that I'm actually weakest in is research. If you're in, real quickly, if you're in places like Seattle or San Francisco, they have specialist roles, but they're harder to find. In places like the Midwest or other areas of the world, then like outside of London, then you actually need to be more of a generalist because companies can't support that specialist role unless you're really, really, really good at your job, and then you're a traveling consultant.
So there's something in being hired for perhaps your soft skills and your ability to learn skills on the job.
Yeah. One more time. Repeat it. I'm not quite understanding the question.
So, for example, being hired for your aptitude in soft skills and then being able to learn those sort of T-shaped, the horizontal part of your T-shaped professional sort of stuff, learning those UX skills in particular areas as a specialist later on.
It's a little bit hard. I mean, like I've dealt with designers that were brought in without a lot of the hard skills, and it's an uphill battle because then other managers come in and they're like, why did they hire this person? And it's great that they have the soft skills, but then at one point or another you have to perform on the job. So it's kind of that's kind of tricky.
Very good. We've got 2 minutes. Maybe we'll try and squeeze in one more question.
Yeah, you can keep me after 3. I don't, as long as it doesn't, we're not getting out of here after 4.
Okay.
Cool.
Tyler's asking about UX resources. So he asks, if you could choose one book to be your UX Bible, what would it be?
I've got a suggestion.
Yeah. UX Bible for what part? For learning UX or for breaking into the field?
I don't know. I guess it would have to include everything to be a UX Bible of everything.
Learning, he said.
Well, well, the getting started in UX gives a really good general overview. The one book I've been recommending lately has been Russ Unger's the UX Project Guide. I forget the job title. Another one, Kelly Goto has this wonderful book called Web Design 2.0 that was published in 2004 that I actually still recommend today. That has a really generalist view of how to do web projects, and it actually includes a little bit of product management stuff. And I'm not saying that because she bought me a drink, but I actually like the book a lot.
We'll dig that out and provide a link somewhere for that.
Yep.
I think that's us out of time. Thank you very much, Patrick. It's an amazing set of responses to those questions. Thanks also very much to all the webinar attendees for great questions and for joining us here today. Just quickly, Patrick, can you let us know where we can find you online?
So again, I run a blog called usabilitycounts.com, which is where I have a UX career guide about 45,000 words. You can also find me in your guys' book, Getting Started in UX, off of UX Mastery. I run a Twitter feed called Usability Counts. Big surprise. Run the UX drinking game. You also can find me on Facebook as Usability Counts blog. You're seeing a trend. And then if you're actually in the Pacific Northwest, I'm generally available for coffee when I can find the time.
Very good. That's very generous of you. Thank you. How about you, Matt?
I've just sent a broken link to our book. Let me fix that. So my name's Matt, and along with Luke, we contribute to UX Mastery. As we've mentioned a couple of times throughout the webinar, we do have an ebook out called Get Started in UX, which we're very proud of. Patrick is one of our featured interviewees, and we think that it's a really good overview of how to launch and shape a career. So please go and check that out. I'm on Twitter at Matty McG, which is a nickname that I've had for a few years, even though my surname doesn't have a Mc in it. So please hit me up on Twitter and say hi.
Very good. And you can find me, Luke Chambers, posting articles on uxmastery.com. I also hang around in the UX Mastery community forums, community.uxmastery.com. My Twitter handle is Lukcha, Lukcha. I'd love to help answer any questions you might have about today's webinar. Great topic. If you're looking for more practical advice in getting started in UX, as Matt said, the ebook is going to be excellent for you. There's links on the website for that. Come and ask us in the forums. Finally, we're going to make sure to email all of you a link to the audio or video of today's webinar. We'll see if we can trace up a transcript as well. But I think that's about it. We're 2 minutes over, but thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you in the forums.
Hey, can I give a shout out to some people that tweeted during the event?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, so Jen Blatz, Jolly Zhao, Brittany Van Putten was there, Simon Catford, Chris Klass, I think he was in the event. Thank you all and Oscar with the interesting, and Claire. Thank you for all the wonderful tweets during the event.
And thanks everybody for getting up on a weekend too. We know that your personal time is precious, so we really appreciate you taking the time to join us on this chat. And thank you to you, Patrick, for giving up for your Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, you're interrupting my whiskey time.
Let you get back
to everyone.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Yeah.
See ya.